Okay, so what we're going to do with this one is we're going to start looking at some nested loops. So basically a nested loop, as we've already kind of talked about with the if statement, is a loop within a loop. So this is going to be running as long as j is greater than 3 and less than or equal to 79. So we're going to put an if statement in here and say if j is equal to 65. Remember, this is a Boolean, so the double equal is mandatory. And we have brackets inside our if statement. And if j is equal to 65, we're going to tell it to break, which means it's going to be ejected. So what it's saying is that if j is equal to 65, it's not going to run it anymore. So let's go ahead and run this program. And it stops at 2077. So it's still running, but it stops at a certain point. So if you want to know what that point is, change some to j. So it runs all the way until j is 65, and then it's ejected from our entire loop, and then it prints the sum at the end. So even though our for loop says it's going to run till j is less than or equal to 79, this break when j is equal to 65 ejects us from both loops. Okay, so I'm going to comment out this if statement for right now. So I'm going to show you guys a trick. So select your if statement, and on your keyboard type the buttons Control, Shift, backslash. It automatically comments out everything that you have highlighted, which is pretty slick. Okay, so earlier I talked to you guys about scope. So what I'm going to do a little example. So I'm going to delete this int j equals 0. And we're going to put int here in our for loop. So then at the end here, I'm going to tell it to print j. Okay, I have a billion parentheses. But it still says that there's an error because j only exists within these brackets. If you declare j inside your control expression or your initializing expression, it can only exist within the loop. It can't exist outside of the loop. So be very cautious. This causes a lot of errors, and a lot of people get really stressed out just because they don't really know what's going on. So I'm going to change it back. You don't have to actually do that to yours. I just want to show you what will happen if you do the scope. So now what I do want to do is I want to show you what happens to j after this is all done. So I'm going to comment out this print inside my loop. So all this loop is doing is adding together a sum. All right, so let's go ahead and hit run. And it prints 80. Your loop was set to stop at 79, so why is it printing 80? What happens is j increments here. Once it hits 79, it's still part of the loop. It runs, it becomes 80, tries to do the loop again. It's no longer less than or equal to 79, so the loop is over, and now j is 80. So keep that in mind whenever you're running these loops. It's going to, the end result of whatever your expression is going to be one more or one less than what you think it's going to be. Okay, you can delete the comment block. I just want to show you guys that keyboard shortcut for that. So go ahead and save it. And we're going to create one more class. And I'm just going to call this lesson 11 nest for. That's what we're going to do. We're going to create a nested for loop. So go ahead and do that. I am going to just copy my comment from the other program because I can. Go through and format those. And we're going to do an int count. This is also a very common variable name when you're doing loop because it kind of keeps account of how many times you've gone through the loop. And then we're going to set up our for loop. So we're going to say int j equals 0, semicolon. Don't forget semicolons in between. We're going to run this as long as j is less than or equal to 20, semicolon. And we're going to increment j by 1 each time. So you don't have to increment or decrement by 1 each time. You could do like j plus equals 5 and increase it by 5 each time, or decrease it by 3, or multiply it by 40. So you have a lot of options, but a lot of times these really do just decrement and increment by 1. You could also put in there j plus equals 1, but you'll be in the minority of people that will do that. Mostly you'll see j plus plus, j minus minus. Don't forget to put in your brackets inside your for loop, and remember there is no semicolon. Okay, so inside this for loop, we're going to create another for loop. So we're going to say for int k equals 0. We're going to run this as long as k is less than 5. Don't forget your semicolons. And we're going to increment k, so k plus plus. Now, I'm going to show you something that you already might remember from if. The only line of code that we're going to put in this nested loop is count plus plus. If there's only one line of code in your for loop, or in any loop, or in any like method kind of thing, like if, you don't need brackets. So because this count plus plus is our only line of code in this for loop, we don't need brackets. You'll most likely see it with brackets, but you don't really need them if it's just one line of code that's going to execute. So I want to talk to you for a second about iterations. So if this is, we're starting our count at 0 and it's going less than 5, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to have 5 iterations. This one is going from 0 to less than or equal to 20. So this one is going to have 21 iterations because it's starting count at 0 and it's counting 20. So keep that in mind when you're looking at less than or equal to, because they run the different amount of times than what you think. So let's talk through this program for a hot second. So j is 0. It comes down. It goes into this for loop. J is still 0. K runs 5 times. It exits the loop. It exits the full loop. It starts over. J is now 1. We go back down. K runs 5 times. So for every once J runs, K is running 5 times. Okay, so basically, if this runs 5 times for every once, and this is 21 iterations, count at the end of this is going to get up to 105. So let's go outside this for loop, outside this for loop, and we're going to system.out.println. We're going to print count. Let's go ahead and run it and see. It does. It hits 105. I will tell you, the #1 mistake that people make is they ignore this no semicolon thing and they put a semicolon here at the end of the for loop. It happens every time. Make sure that you're not one of those people. Now, for lesson 11, you guys have some questions and you also have a project. The project is going to encourage you to stretch yourself. It is not going to be an easy project. You're going to prompt your user with a scanner and say, please enter your name. And then they're going to type their name in. That's not something you're going to put in your program. That's just his name. You're going to create a for loop using the substring method. So you might have to go back to where we learned about strings to figure out how to do the substring. Then you're going to take their name, put it in lowercase, and repeat it back to them backwards. Good luck. If you have any questions, please let me know, but I do want you to try this on your own.